Okay, what if you're constantly arguing? Oh, this lady told me that every day or every other day there is some kind of argument in her house. In fact, she got to the point where she couldn't take it anymore. She actually left the marital home. Ooh, that's a lot. What do you do when you're always triggered? Everything you say, you're being accused of maybe criticizing, complaining, murmuring, you get shut down, and after a while, you just can't be bothered at all because you can't take the argument. What do you do? Well, first of all, you need to know that if you're arguing, you're not arguing about the thing that you think you're arguing about. You're arguing, you're upset, and your spouse is equally upset about deep emotional needs that are not being met. There are emotions and feelings below the 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 things that you're arguing about, whether it's money or sex or something not done in the house, below that, almost like an iceberg, are huge emotional needs that are either being triggered or that are not being met. And as a result of that, you have these circular arguments that can go on for weeks, months, if not years. So one of the things that you do is I have an acronym called RESET. RESET. The first thing is to reveal the pattern, recognize the pattern, recognize and become aware that there is a trigger, and when that trigger is set off, both of you go into a dance. It's almost like a choreographed dance, but it's a negative dance. You say something, they react, you respond to the reaction, they respond to the response of the reaction, and then it just spirals out of control. You get flooded, somebody blow up or shut down, and the worst thing is after the hurt feelings, the resentment, the terrible silence, the awkward silence between that. So you need to be aware of the triggers, you need to be aware of the dance, and once you become aware of the pattern or schema, we call it, then you need to look at E, which is to evaluate the story. I'm going to go very slow here. Your mind is a story making machine, and your mind is always making up things. Now, get this, not everything your mind tells you is actually true. It feels true, it feels real because there's emotion behind it. But you need to, like as good scientists, you need to check the validity of what your mind is telling you. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's valid, sometimes it's real, but sometimes it's all made up in the mind. And so all of us, when our emotions are triggered, we put meaning to the emotions. When someone tells us something that upsets us, we go back into the database of our mind and we attach meaning to that thing that perhaps the other person didn't really intend. Lots of times I've seen couples where this one spouse says something, the other spouse reacts, but he or she is reacting to something totally different to what the first spouse had in mind. So we need to be very careful. Check the story that your mind is telling you with regards to what is happening or what the other person says or said to you. And you need to ask yourself a simple question. Is that true? It may come across factual, but is the story that you're making up true? Are there alternatives to that? I like Ellen Langer, who says that the actions of the actor make sense to him or her. So your spouse may be doing something that you think, or saying something that you think is rather stupid and ludicrous. And who does that? Again, that's something. Who does that? Who says that? But in your spouse's mind, that makes perfect sense. So you need to just look at what you're telling yourself about what is happening. And what you're telling yourself about what is happening can be true, but it doesn't necessarily have to be true. And it could be that you're looking at it from a different perspective, and you need to just accept that. Your spouse's perspective, you have a different perspective. They have a concept that you don't fully understand. And perhaps you may approach that with some curiosity. Why did that person say that? What could be some of the reasons? You have come up with one, but there are many alternative other reasons that might fit the scenario just as easily as the one that you have. So remember to evaluate the story that you're telling yourself. That would, right? And then once you have evaluated the story, you need to stop the reactivity. Now, this, some people call it emotional regulation, emotional contagion. You can control your emotions. You can catch yourself. Like someone who's epileptic or someone who is diabetic, they get to learn certain symptoms or signs that the seizure is coming on, or that they're going to have some kind of reaction. Maybe their blood sugar is low, they need to, top up their sugar levels, etc. So at certain point in time, you will begin to recognize that when you're triggered, you begin to feel a tension in your throat, your heart begin to beat harder, maybe your fists become clenched, maybe you feel a rush of blood and you get hot. All of these are symptoms that you're getting flooded, and you can contain yourself. You can say, well, look, before I say something or do something that I'll be sorry about, let me just regulate, let me debrief, let me de-escalate. And one quick way of doing this is simply to breathe. When you breathe, I use the acronym STOP. S is to step back, to step away, or to stop, just to calm yourself. Just stop. Don't say, even if it's on your tongue, don't say it, and just take a breathe. Breathe out or become aware of this circumstance. And then you need to tune into what's happening. What's happening in your body? Tune into the feelings that, and if you can, to attune to your spouse. What might be going on with him in his body or her body? What might be going on in his brain? Maybe he had a bad day. Maybe she's on her monthly cycle. Maybe she is just irritated because he or she is hungry. And you begin to tune in, which brings us to the O, which is to observe. And then once you observe, and another O is to check out your options. What options? You might decide that, look, I need some fresh air. I need to go for a walk. I need to take away. But you need to let the person know, okay, I'm going to just pop up for a walk, clear my head. And when we come back, we can maybe approach it from a much more level-headed perspective. Because right now, we're not thinking, and we're saying and doing things that will be sorry. And then you proceed with caution. So evaluate your story, then stop the emotional reactivity. Remember, we're using the acronym RESET. R is to observe the pattern, the schema, the dance that's going on. E is to evaluate the story. S is to stop the reactivity. And E is to execute a different action. Any action, not the same dance. But if you're dancing, and you're driving and you have a partner with you, you're moving. If you interrupt the pattern, even if you stop, somehow it's going to create a trigger reaction with your spouse, because they're expecting you to move to the rhythm or move in a different direction. If it is that you had a pattern of tit for tat, butter for fat, you kill my dog, I kill your cat, and when it goes tit, you don't do tat, then it disrupts the pattern. So you need to execute a slightly different action. And you want to ask yourself the question, really, what do I need? Because sometimes the argument gets derailed into something totally different to what you actually need. What would fix and solve the problem? What would make me feel better? What would fix and solve the problem for my spouse? And what would make them feel better? And maybe sometimes, once you get clarity with what you need, what you would like to have happen, you could just ask nicely. Ask like a little girl would ask her daddy, Dad, please, please, pretty please. But just ask nicely. Say, what would make me feel better right now? If you give me a hug. Or all I really want is for you to take me for a drive. It would really be nice if you clean the kitchen. It would make me feel so good because I'm really tired right now. Just ask nicely. And I guarantee you, 90 times out of 100, your spouse would comply when you ask nicely. Not with a attitude, but with just a humble attitude. It's just a humble approach. And finally, you need to retrain, reset. T is for training your system. So you find different ways of responding to problems, and you execute those more effective measures and means constantly until you set the system and you have a different, more positive schema. Well, I hope that helps, and I'll talk to you in the next video. And if you have a problem that you need solving, talk to me. Click the link someplace in the bio and get the book, and we'll talk soon. Bye.